The Guilty returns, seeking revenge for the entire fortress. Part 1: The Ghost of Wall Street. They thought they buried him under a mountain of legal papers and a 10-year sentence. They were wrong. Behind the cold bars of a federal prison, Julian Vane didn't just serve time. Built a mental blueprint of the fortress he once called home. Now, the gates are opening, and Julian isn't looking for his old life. He's looking for the people who stole it. Because in the game of power, the most dangerous man is the one who has already lost everything. The rain in Manhattan didn't wash away the sins of the past. It only made the neon lights of the financial district blur into a sea of cold. Artificial gold. Standing at the corner of Liberty Street, Julian Vane adjusted his collar. His suit was 10 years out of style, but his eyes were sharper than any high-frequency trading algorithm. 10 years ago, Julian was the golden architect of Sterling Vane Holdings. He built the Fortress, a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund that was impenetrable to outside attacks. But he forgot one thing: a fortress is most vulnerable from the inside. His three partners, Marcus, the charismatic face, Sarah, the legal shark, and Elias, the tech prodigy, had orchestrated a masterpiece of betrayal. They fabricated a paper trail of embezzlement that pointed directly at Julian. While he sat in a 6x9 cell, they expanded the fortress, turning it into a global empire. They stayed rich, stayed powerful, and stayed silent. Julian walked toward a small, dimly lit bar where the power players of the city went to disappear. He didn't have money, but he had something better. He knew where the bodies were buried, not literal bodies, but the financial skeletons that could topple the entire US banking system. He sat at the back, watching a news report on a giant screen above the bar. Marcus was being interviewed, smiling, talking about integrity and the future of American wealth. Julian took a sip of his cheap whiskey and whispered to the screen, "Enjoy the view, Marcus. It's a long way down." As Julian left the bar, a black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down to reveal not an assassin, but Sarah, the woman who had provided the false testimony that sent him away. She looked terrified. "Julian," she breathed, her voice trembling, "you shouldn't have come back. They've already set a price on your head before you even walked out of those prison gates." Julian smiled. He wasn't the prey. He had leaked his own release date to the very people who wanted him dead. This is the scarcity of information tactic combined with strategic vulnerability. By appearing as a weak, guilty man returning to the scene of the crime, Julian forces his enemies to react emotionally rather than logically. In power dynamics, the person who forces the first move usually gains the upper hand. Julian is using his stigma as a weapon to lure his targets out of their protected shells. Power is not just about what you own, it's about what people think you know. Revenge is most effective when the target believes they are the ones in control. To destroy a fortress, you don't attack the walls, you poison the well. Part 2: The Art of the Invisible Thread. In the world of the elite, trust is a luxury no one can afford, and paranoia is the air they breathe. Julian Vane knew that to destroy the fortress, he didn't need a battering ram, he just needed to plant a single seed of doubt. If you make a predator believe another predator is coming for their throat, they will stop hunting you and start tearing each other apart. Watch closely, because the puppet master has just picked up the strings. Sarah's hands were shaking as she gripped the steering wheel of her luxury SUV. Julian sat in the passenger seat, his presence filling the cabin like a ghost that refused to stay dead. "They think you're a threat, Julian," she whispered, her eyes scanning the dark Manhattan street. "Marcus has spent millions on security since the rumors of your release started. He's terrified." Julian didn't look at her. Instead, he pulled a small, encrypted flash drive from his pocket, an artifact from a decade ago that he had kept hidden in a safe deposit box no one knew existed. "I don't care about his guards, Sarah," Julian said calmly. "I care about the Black Ledger. You remember it, don't you? The one Elias used to hide the offshore transfers we made before everything went south. Sarah went pale. The black ledger was the digital backbone of their betrayal, a record of every bribe, every falsified document, and every cent stolen from the investors. If that ledger went public, the fortress wouldn't just crumble, it would be incinerated by the Department of Justice. But Julian didn't want to hand it to the police. Not yet. He told Sarah to drive him to an old industrial loft in Brooklyn, a place far from the glitz of Wall Street. As he got out, he handed her a single piece of paper with a series of numbers written on it. "Give this to Elias," Julian commanded. "Tell him it's the key to the second half of the ledger. Tell him Marcus is trying to sell the decrypted version to a Russian conglomerate to cut Elias and you out of the deal." Julian knew the psychology of his former friends. Marcus was the ego, Sarah was the fear, and Elias was the greed. By giving Sarah a weapon to use against Marcus, Julian wasn't helping her. He was creating a Mexican standoff. He was the invisible thread connecting their mutual destruction. He watched Sarah speed away, knowing that by morning, the internal war within the fortress would begin. The numbers Julian gave Sarah weren't a key to any ledger. They were the coordinates to a GPS location, the very spot where Julian was supposedly hiding. He wasn't just inciting a fight, he was baiting a trap. He wanted him to come to him, but not to talk. He wanted him to come with the intention of finishing what they started 10 years ago. Right in front of the cameras he had pre-installed in the loft. Julian is utilizing the triangulation tactic. In psychology, triangulation happens when one person manipulates a relationship between two other people by feeding them conflicting information. By positioning himself as a victim who is being sold out by one partner to another, he triggers the survival instinct. When people feel their survival, or wealth, is threatened, their higher-level reasoning shuts down, making them easy to manipulate. The strongest alliances are built on shared gain, but they are destroyed by shared fear. If you want to break a group, don't attack the group, change the incentives so that betraying each other becomes more profitable than staying loyal. Part 3: The Hunger of the Prodigy. Greed is a fire that never says, enough. And Elias was a man who lived in the flames. He didn't just want to be rich, he wanted to be the god of the machine he built. Julian knew that if you offer a hungry man a feast, he won't ask if the meat is poisoned. He'll just start eating. The trap is set, the bait is moving, and the first domino is about to fall. Elias sat in his high-tech penthouse in Tribeca, surrounded by screens displaying real-time global market shifts. He was the youngest partner of the fortress, the genius who turned Julian's vision into a digital goldmine. But being a genius didn't make him immune to the oldest human flaw: envy. When Sarah arrived with the numbers and the story of Marcus's supposed betrayal, Elias didn't even hesitate. He didn't call Marcus to verify. In his mind, Marcus was already an obstacle. "Marcus is selling us out," Elias hissed, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "I built the encryption that protects his assets. Without me, he's just a suit with a loud mouth." Sarah, acting exactly as Julian predicted, fueled the fire. Julian has the other half of the ledger. Elias, if Marcus gets it first, he'll wipe our names from the accounts and leave us to take the fall for the 2014 SEC investigation. By midnight, the internal server of the fortress was buzzing. Elias began a defensive strike, a covert operation to lock Marcus out of the offshore accounts. Using the GPS coordinates Julian provided as a secure drop site for the decrypted data, he thought he was protecting himself. In reality, he was opening a back door for a ghost. While Elias was busy hacking his own partner, Julian was sitting in the shadows of the Brooklyn loft, watching the data stream on a cracked laptop. He wasn't just watching the money move, he was watching the psychological collapse of a decade-long alliance. He sent a single, anonymous text to Marcus: "Elias is moving the funds. Look at the server logs for the Black Ledger folder. He's leaving you for dead." The two most powerful men in the fortress were now convinced the other was the traitor. The Black Ledger that Elias thought he was accessing wasn't a record of their past crimes. It was a sophisticated Trojan horse. As Elias tried to save the data, he was actually uploading a virus that didn't delete files, but instead started broadcasting their private, incriminating communications to every major news outlet and regulatory agency in the country, on a time delay. Julian wasn't just stealing their money, he was automating their public execution. Julian is exploiting the confirmation bias and the sunk cost fallacy. Elias and Marcus already had a baseline of mistrust because their relationship was built on a crime. When Julian provided evidence that confirmed their fears, they didn't look for the truth, they only looked for ways to win. Because they had invested 10 years in this lie, they were willing to take extreme risks to save it, which ultimately led to their exposure. The most effective way to destroy an enemy is to let their own ambition do the work. When you understand what a person fears losing the most, you can make them destroy themselves trying to protect it. A house divided against itself cannot stand, especially when the foundation is made of secrets. Part 4: The Mirror of Paranoia. The most effective way to paralyze a powerful man is not to attack his body, but to poison his mind with the one thing he can't control, the unknown. When everyone around you is a potential traitor, the walls of your own fortress become your prison. Marcus is about to learn that when you play the game of shadows, the person standing right behind you is usually the one holding the knife. Marcus Sterling paced his corner office on the 80th floor, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of a city he thought he owned. But tonight, the lights of New York felt like thousands of judgmental eyes. He had just received the anonymous text about Elias moving the funds. His first instinct was to call security, but then he saw it, the internal server log. Someone had indeed accessed the Black Ledger folder using his own administrative override code. "That little rat," Marcus growled, referring to Elias. He didn't realize that Julian had used a simple phishing link embedded in a legal update emailed to steal Marcus's credentials hours ago. To Marcus, the evidence was undeniable. Elias was trying to frame him and flee with the offshore billions. The silence in the office was shattered by a phone call. It was Sarah. Her voice was hysterical. "Marcus, the FBI. I saw a black van outside my house. Julian gave Elias a key. And now Elias is deleting everything. We're going to jail." Julian, sitting in his dimly lit loft, listened to the intercepted call with a cold smile. He had used a voice cloning AI to make Sarah sound more panicked than she actually was. Filtering the call through a proxy, he was creating a feedback loop of terror. Marcus, now convinced that both his partners had turned on him, grabbed a burner phone and called a cleaner, a man paid to make problems disappear. "I need Elias neutralized," Marcus whispered, "and I need it done at the Brooklyn coordinates I'm sending you now." By sending his assassin to the very place Julian was staying, Marcus was doing exactly what Julian wanted. He was bringing the crime to Julian's doorstep, where the cameras were waiting to capture the face of the man who ordered the hit. The cleaner Marcus hired wasn't a stranger. He was an undercover federal agent who had been tracking Julian's case for years. Someone Julian had reached out to anonymously from prison. Julian wasn't just recording a murder attempt, he was handing the authorities a smoking gun on a silver platter, ensuring that Marcus's downfall would be legal, public, and irreversible. This is the paranoia induction technique. By isolating Marcus and feeding him confirmed threats from his inner circle, Julian triggers the amygdala hijack. This is a state where the brain's emotional center takes over, bypassing the rational prefrontal cortex. Marcus is no longer a strategic CEO. He is a cornered animal acting on pure survival instinct, which makes his actions predictable and self-destructive. In any conflict, the side that remains calm and controls the flow of information wins. If you can make your enemy stop trusting their senses, they will eventually trip over their own shadow. The greatest weapon against a tyrant is his own belief that everyone is as corrupt as he is. Part 5: The Digital Gallows. In the digital age, your secrets aren't just data, they are the ammunition for your own execution. Elias thought he was the master of the code, but he forgot that code has no loyalty. While he was busy trying to outsmart Marcus, he was actually building the very gallows that would hang them both. When the screen goes dark, who do you trust in a room full of shadows? Elias's fingers were a blur across his mechanical keyboard. The blue light from his 6 monitors cast a sickly pallor on his face. He had successfully diverted $60 million into a secure, offshore account. Or so he thought. He felt a rush of adrenaline, the God complex of a hacker who had just outmaneuvered a titan like Marcus Sterling. But then, the screen flickered. A single line of red text appeared across all 6 monitors. Access denied. System overridden by user, architect. Architect, Elias whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. That was Julian's old internal handle. It was impossible. Julian had been offline for a decade. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a video call from an unknown number. When he answered, there was no face, only a live feed of the Brooklyn loft where Julian was supposed to be hiding. Elias saw the black SUV Marcus had sent. He saw the cleaner stepping out, suppressed pistol in hand. But then, the feed changed. It showed Marcus's office, captured by a hidden camera in a smoke detector. Marcus was on the phone, screaming at someone to finish it. Elias realized with cold horror that Julian wasn't just watching, he was broadcasting. Every keystroke Elias had made to steal the money was being logged and sent directly to a secure server at the SEC. Every order Marcus gave to the assassin was being recorded by federal agents. Julian's voice finally came through the speakers, calm and melodic. You always were better at math than people. Elias, you didn't notice the transfer protocol I gave you was a loop. You haven't moved Marcus's money. You've been moving your personal liquid assets into the settlement fund for the victims of the 2014 fraud. You just paid for your own funeral. Elias tried to pull the plug on his servers, but a physical lock had been engaged on his penthouse door. Outside, the sirens began to wail. Julian hadn't just called the police. He had leaked Elias's location to the Russian conglomerate Marcus was allegedly selling out to. The Russians weren't coming to arrest him. They were coming to reclaim the investment. Julian had turned his enemies' allies into their executioners. Julian is using the God complex deconstruction. People with high technical intelligence often suffer from the illusion that they can control any system. By allowing Elias to feel a false sense of mastery, moving the money, Julian leads him into a commitment trap. Once Elias committed to the theft, he stopped looking for external threats, making him blind to the physical world outside his screens. The more complex your system, the easier it is to hide a flaw. Never assume you are the smartest person in the room just because you hold the key. The person who built the door always knows how to kick it down. In power, your greatest strength, your expertise, is often your greatest blind spot. Part 6: The Fragility of the Weak. In any betrayal, there is always a weakest link, the person who did the crime but couldn't live with the shadow. Sarah thought her fear would protect her, that being a victim of Julian's return would earn her mercy. But in the architecture of revenge, the weak are not spared. They are used as the bridge to reach the untouchable. Sarah is about to find out that a guilty conscience is a luxury she can no longer afford. Sarah locked herself in the bathroom of her Greenwich Village townhouse, the marble floors feeling like ice beneath her feet. The black SUV she saw outside wasn't the FBI, it was Julian's bluff. But her mind had already done the work for him. Paranoia had turned every shadow into a badge and every siren into a life sentence. Her phone lay on the vanity, glowing with a new message from an unknown sender. It was a photo of the original forged document she had signed 10 years ago to frame Julian. How does he have this? She gasped. The original was supposed to be shredded in Marcus's private furnace. Julian's voice, recorded and sent as a voice memo, followed. Marcus didn't destroy it. Sarah, he kept it. He kept it to ensure your loyalty. He's been holding the noose around your neck for a decade. And you didn't even notice. This was Julian's masterstroke of manipulation. He didn't actually have the document. He had used high-end generative AI to recreate a perfect replica of the forgery. Knowing Sarah's guilt would prevent her from questioning its authenticity, by blaming Marcus for keeping the evidence. Julian effectively severed the last thread of trust between the partners. Sarah wasn't just afraid of Julian anymore. She was filled with a burning, vengeful rage toward Marcus. She grabbed her keys and her gun. She didn't head for the police station. She headed for the fortress. Julian watched her through the traffic cameras of Manhattan. Sipping a cold coffee, he had successfully turned the legal shark into a desperate predator. The fortress was no longer under attack from the outside. Its pillars were now actively trying to crush its foundation. Julian had already tipped off Marcus's security that Sarah was coming to finish the job Elias had started. He wasn't just setting her up to fail. He was ensuring she arrived at the fortress exactly when the federal agents, prompted by Julian's earlier leaks, were moving in to serve search warrants. Sarah was walking into a crossfire she didn't even know existed, armed with a weapon that would seal her fate as a violent conspirator, not a witness. Julian is employing manufactured betrayal by creating a false narrative that one ally is holding evidence against another. He triggers the self-fulfilling prophecy. Sarah believes Marcus betrayed her, so she acts in a way that forces Marcus to actually betray her by calling security. This breaks the bystander effect within the group, forcing every member to act aggressively to save themselves, which only accelerates the collective ruin. The person who plays the victim is often the most dangerous when cornered. If you want to destroy a group of conspirators, you don't need to find the truth. You only need to convince them that their partners have already sold them out. Anger is a powerful tool, but it blinds you to the fact that you are being steered by someone else's hand. Part 7: The Siege of the Ivory Tower. When the walls of a multi-billion-dollar empire start to crumble, the noise isn't made by falling bricks, but by the frantic shredding of documents and the sound of sirens closing in. The fortress is no longer a sanctuary, it's a kill box. As federal agents swarm the lobby, the three partners realize that their enemy isn't outside the gates, he's already inside their heads. The lobby of Sterling Vane Holdings was a scene of controlled chaos. FBI agents in windbreakers moved with surgical precision, seizing servers and boxing up a decade of lies. On the 80th floor, Marcus Sterling watched the security monitors with a hollow expression. He had just seen Sarah being tackled in the parking garage, a pistol sliding across the concrete away from her reaching hand. She had come to kill him, just as Julian had whispered she would. "It's over, Marcus," a voice crackled through the office intercom. It wasn't security, it was Julian. "The Black Ledger is currently being decrypted by the DOJ's cybercrime unit. Every bribe you paid to the senators, every offshore account Elias set up, every forged signature Sarah provided, it's all there. You didn't just build a fortress, you built a digital evidence locker." Marcus grabbed his desk phone, trying to call his high-priced attorneys, but the line was dead. Instead, the giant television in his office flickered to life. It showed a live news broadcast. Elias was being led out of his penthouse in handcuffs, looking frail and broken. The reporter was reading a statement from an anonymous whistleblower who had provided a roadmap to the largest financial fraud in US history. Julian appeared on the screen, not as a guest, but in a pre-recorded video he had sent to the network. He looked calm, wearing the same outdated suit from Part 1. 10 years ago, they told the world I was the guilty one, Julian said to the camera. Today, the world gets to see the faces of the people who actually held the pen. Marcus realized then that Julian didn't just want them in jail. He wanted their names erased from the history of success they had so carefully crafted. As Marcus prepared to surrender, he noticed a small, blinking device under his desk. It was a high-frequency audio transmitter Julian had planted years ago, before he was even arrested. Julian hadn't just returned for revenge. He had been listening to them for 10 years through a dormant backup system they forgot to deactivate. He knew every secret plan they made while he was behind bars. He wasn't catching up. He was simply finishing a conversation he started a decade ago. Julian is utilizing the total exposure effect. In power dynamics, a secret only has power as long as it remains hidden. By forcing a simultaneous collapse, FBI raid plus news leak plus partner betrayal, Julian induces cognitive overload. Marcus can't fight the law, the media, and his own partners at the same time. When a person is overwhelmed, they stop resisting and begin to subconsciously accept their defeat, which is the ultimate form of psychological submission. The greatest vulnerability of any power structure is the assumption that the past is dead. If you leave a single thread of an old lie hanging, eventually someone will find it and pull until the whole tapestry unravels. Revenge isn't a single blow. It's a systematic dismantling of the target's reality. Part 8: The Prisoner's Dilemma. The most dangerous place in the world isn't a battlefield. It's an interrogation room where your only way out is to bury your best friend. Julian didn't need to convict his enemies. He just needed to give them a reason to confess. When the federal prosecutor offers only one seat on the lifeboat, even the strongest fortress becomes a shark tank. In the end, loyalty is just a word people use until the price of silence becomes too high. The walls of the federal detention center in Manhattan were a sterile, unforgiving gray. Marcus, Sarah, and Elias were in separate wings, isolated from the world and from each other. This was exactly what Julian had planned. He knew that the fortress was built on a foundation of mutual crime. And a foundation of crime is only as strong as its weakest secret. Sarah was the first to crack. Julian had ensured she was accidentally shown a leaked document in the observation room, a fake plea deal supposedly signed by Marcus hours earlier. The document suggested Marcus was blaming her for every forged signature and every illegal bribe. In reality, Marcus was sitting in silence, refusing to speak without his lawyers. But Sarah didn't know that. She only saw the ghost of a betrayal Julian had manufactured. "I'll tell you everything," Sarah whispered to the lead investigator, her voice cracking. "Marcus forced me. He kept the originals of the forgeries to blackmail me. I was just a pawn." Meanwhile, Julian sent a message to Elias through a corrupt guard, a guard who was actually working for the federal agents Julian had assisted. The message contained a snippet of code from Elias's private server. It was the Black Ledger virus. The note attached read, "Marcus told the FBI you built this virus to frame him. He's claiming he was the victim of your digital extortion." Elias, fueled by the God complex Julian had bruised in Part 5, didn't think twice. He began explaining the technical architecture of the fraud, detailing how Marcus had authorized the offshore transfers. By the time the lawyers arrived, the three partners had already provided enough evidence to bury each other for 3 lifetimes. They weren't fighting the government anymore. They were fighting to see who could betray the others the fastest. The prosecutor, who was taking Sarah's confession, wasn't the lead on the case. He was a junior assistant Julian had known from his own trial, a man Julian had secretly provided with the roadmap to this investigation. Julian had essentially handpicked the team that would dismantle the fortress, ensuring that no one could pull strings behind the scenes. The partners weren't talking to save themselves, they were talking to an audience Julian had curated. Julian is implementing a classic prisoner's dilemma on a massive scale. By creating a perceived betrayal, he forces the subjects to choose their own survival over the collective good. This is intensified by social isolation, which removes the possibility of a coordinated defense. When people are isolated and believe their allies have already betrayed them, they experience reactive devaluation. They stop valuing the relationship and start seeing their partners as enemies that must be defeated. The strength of a secret society is not in its walls, but in the silence of its members. If you can break that silence, the walls will fall on their own. To defeat a group, you must first convince each individual that they are alone. Isolation is the greatest catalyst for truth, or at least, the version of the truth that serves your purpose. Part 9. The Ghost in the Boardroom. What is more painful than losing your freedom? It's watching the empire you built be handed over to the very man you tried to destroy. Julian Vane didn't just want his former partners in prison, he wanted to sit in their chairs, drink from the glasses, and sign their death warrants with their own pens. The fortress hasn't fallen, it's just under new management. While Marcus, Sarah, and Elias were busy tearing each other apart in interrogation rooms, the outside world was witnessing a corporate coup d'état of unprecedented proportions. Sterling Vane Holdings stock had plummeted to near zero. The fortress was bleeding out, and the vultures were circling. But among the vultures, there was one silent predator who had been buying up every distressed share for pennies on the dollar. Julian Vane sat in the darkened boardroom of the 80th floor. He wasn't hiding anymore. He had used a complex network of shell companies, funded by the very offshore accounts Elias thought he was hiding, to execute a hostile takeover of his own former company. Legally, the money belonged to the victims of the fraud, but Julian had positioned himself as the court-appointed restructuring officer. To the public, he was the redeemed hero returning to clean up the mess. To Marcus, who was watching the news from a small TV in the holding cell, Julian was a monster. Julian picked up Marcus's favorite crystal decanter and poured a drink. He looked at the empty chairs where his friends used to sit. He didn't feel joy. He felt the cold satisfaction of a mechanic who had finally fixed a broken machine. He picked up a pen, the same gold fountain pen Marcus used to sign the documents that sent Julian to prison, and signed a corporate resolution. This document officially dissolved the partnership and rebranded the firm. The fortress was dead. In its place was Vane Recovery, a firm dedicated to liquidating the assets of the three traitors. Julian then made a phone call. It wasn't to a lawyer, but to the tabloid press. He leaked the personal, most embarrassing secrets of Marcus's private life, things Julian had heard through the hidden microphones over the last decade. He didn't just want them convicted of fraud, he wanted them to be pariahs, hated by the very society they had spent millions trying to impress. The vultures Julian used to buy the shares weren't just random investors. They were the original victims of the 2014 fraud, people who had lost their life savings. Julian had secretly contacted them months ago, organizing them into a legal block. He wasn't just taking the company for himself, he was turning the fortress into a weapon of restitution. By the time Marcus realized this, he wasn't just a criminal, he was the man who had been defeated by the very people he had stepped on to get to the top. Julian is exercising symbolic domination. It's not enough to win, you must occupy the space and symbols of the enemy's power. By sitting in Marcus's office and using his pen, Julian is performing a psychological eviction. He is also using the halo effect in reverse, by rebranding himself as the savior of the victims. He makes any defense Marcus tries to mount look like a desperate attack on the innocent. True revenge is not about taking something away, it's about replacing the enemy's legacy with your own. When you control the narrative and the symbols of power, the truth becomes whatever you say it is. If you want to finish an enemy, don't just take their money, take their identity. Part 10. The Glass Cage. There is no greater hell than being forced to watch your own destruction from the front row. Julian Vane didn't just want his enemies behind bars, he wanted them to see him standing where they once stood, holding everything they ever loved. In the game of power, the final humiliation isn't the loss of freedom, it's the realization that you were never the player, only a piece on someone else's board. The visitation room at the federal prison was separated by a thick pane of reinforced glass. On one side sat Marcus Sterling, His tailored suit replaced by a coarse orange jumpsuit. His eyes were bloodshot. His face aged a decade in just a few weeks. On the other side sat Julian, calm, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than Marcus's remaining legal defense fund. "Why, Julian," Marcus croaked into the handset. "We could have settled this. We could have given you a cut of the expansion. You didn't have to burn the whole fortress down." Julian leaned in, his voice a cold whisper that seemed to vibrate through the glass. "You still don't get it, Marcus. I didn't burn it down because I wanted the money. I burned it down because you built it on my grave. You thought that by burying me, you could steal the soul of the company. But the fortress was never the building or the accounts. It was the trust of the people you cheated. I didn't destroy your life. I simply stopped protecting you from yourself." Julian then placed a single folder against the glass. It was a report from Vane Recovery. It showed that every single personal asset Marcus owned, his Hamptons estate, his fleet of Ferraris, even the trust fund for his children, had been seized as part of the victim restitution program. Marcus was not just going to prison, he was going there as a pauper. Sarah and Elias were facing similar fates. Sarah's legal license had been permanently revoked, and Elias's reputation in the tech world was so toxic that even the dark web forums refused to host his code. Julian had effectively turned their names into synonyms for traitor. As Julian stood up to leave, he looked at Marcus one last time. "The world will remember me as the man who was wrongly accused and came back to do justice. They will remember you as a footnote of greed." As Julian walked out, Marcus screamed, "You're just like us, Julian. You used the same dirty money to buy the shares." Julian stopped and turned. "No, Marcus, I didn't use the money. I used the expectation of the money. I never touched a cent of the offshore accounts. I donated the access keys to the Department of Justice on the day I was released. The shares I bought them with a loan guaranteed by the victims themselves. I own nothing. They own everything. I'm just the one they chose to run it." Julian is utilizing moral superiority as a weapon. By detaching himself from the financial gain and aligning himself with the victims, he creates a psychological shield that makes him untouchable. He also uses negative social proof against Marcus. By ensuring the public sees Marcus as a social pariah, he removes Marcus's ability to ever regain power, even if he were to get out of prison. Lesson: the ultimate victory in any conflict is to be the one who defines the morality of the outcome. If you win but are seen as a villain, you have only won half the battle. If you win and are seen as a savior, you have won for eternity. Power is most stable when it is perceived as justice. Part 11: The Empty Throne. The hardest part of winning isn't the battle itself. It's surviving the silence that follows. Julian Vane has dismantled the lives of those who framed him. But a ghost cannot simply become a man again. As the last of the fortress's assets are sold off, Julian faces the final truth of power. Once you've destroyed everyone who knew the old you, you are the only one left to tell the story. But whose story is it really? The 80th floor of the former Sterling Vane Tower was almost empty. Movers had already taken the expensive art, the mahogany desks, and the symbols of excess. Julian stood by the window, watching the sunset bleed over the Hudson River. The news cycle had moved on to a new scandal, and the names Marcus, Sarah, and Elias were already becoming trivia questions in the annals of Wall Street crimes. They were sentenced to 25 years each, with no possibility of early parole, a deal Julian had meticulously ensured through his cooperation with the federal government. Julian walked to the center of the room. He placed a small, silver key on the floor. This was the key to the safe deposit box where he had kept the black ledger files. But there was a second compartment in that box that even the FBI didn't know about. Inside were the letters of apology the partners had written to each other during their early years, proof that they were once more than just co-conspirators. They were friends. Julian didn't feel the rush he expected. Instead, he felt a profound sense of strategic isolation. He had spent 10 years in a cell imagining this moment. And now that it was here, he realized he had become the very thing he hated, a man who manipulated everyone to get what he wanted. He had won the war, but he had lost the ability to trust anyone ever again. He picked up a phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in a decade. It was his daughter, now a young woman who barely remembered his face. When she answered, he didn't speak, he just listened to her voice for a few seconds before hanging up. He realized that while he was seeking revenge for the entire fortress, he had forgotten to rebuild his own home. As Julian prepared to leave the office for the last time, his personal lawyer walked in with a final document. "Mr. Vane, there's one more thing. Under the terms of the restitution agreement, since you were the whistleblower and the original founder, the court has awarded you a 10% management fee of the liquidated assets." Julian looked at the number. It was $150 million. He had set out to give everything back to the victims, but the law had forced him to become a multi-millionaire in the process. He had become the very elite he had just dismantled. Julian is experiencing the conqueror's void. This occurs when a goal that has defined a person's life for years is finally achieved, leaving a psychological vacuum. He is also dealing with moral licensing, the internal struggle of believing his good deed, giving money back to victims, justifies the dark methods he used. By the end, he realizes that in the process of destroying his enemies, he has adopted their traits to survive. Revenge is a mirror. When you spend too long staring at the people you want to destroy, you eventually start to see their reflection in yourself. You can take back your power and your money, but you can never take back the time you spent hating. The ultimate price of power is the person you have to become to keep it. Part 12: The Architect of Reality. The game is over, the fortress is ash, and the players are in chains. But in the world of power, there is no such thing as a clean ending. Julian Vane has his revenge, his money, and his reputation, but he also has a secret that would change everything. Because the ultimate trick of the mind isn't making people believe a lie, it's making them believe they finally found the truth. Julian stood at the entrance of the Federal Cemetery in Arlington. It was a cold, gray morning. He wasn't there to visit a grave, but to meet a ghost. A man stepped out from the shadows of a large oak tree. It was the lead investigator from the FBI who had dismantled the fortress. But they didn't shake hands like strangers. They nodded like partners. "The funds have been distributed, Julian," the agent said. "The victims got 90%. Your 10% management fee is in an offshore account that even the DOJ can't track. Just like we agreed 10 years ago." The truth, cold and sharp, finally emerged. Julian hadn't been a victim of a sudden betrayal 10 years ago. He had orchestrated his own downfall. He realized back then that the fortress was becoming too bloated, too tracked by regulators, and his partners were becoming too greedy to control. If he had stayed, he would have gone down with the ship. So, he planted the evidence that allowed Marcus, Sarah, and Elias to frame him. He went to prison voluntarily to clean his record and to wait for the perfect moment to return and, legitimately, seize the assets under the guise of justice. He had used the last decade to turn his prison sentence into the ultimate alibi. He had manipulated the legal system, the media, and his own friends to perform a massive wealth redistribution, where he ended up as the only one with clean hands and a full pocket. As he walked toward his waiting car, Julian looked at the city skyline one last time. He didn't see a place of business. He saw a playground of psychological puppets. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. He played the last message Elias had sent from prison. It wasn't a curse. It was a plea for forgiveness. Elias still believed Julian was the innocent victim. Julian deleted the message with a smirk. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying their lives. It was making them feel guilty for a crime that Julian had invited them to commit. Julian has mastered the long game and Machiavellian altruism. By appearing to sacrifice himself for a greater good, the victims, he gains moral authority, which is the highest form of power. He utilized self-handicapping, deliberately creating an obstacle for himself, prison, to make his eventual success seem miraculous and beyond suspicion. People never look for a mastermind behind a tragedy if that mastermind appears to be the primary victim. Power is not about winning the fight, it's about writing the rules of the game before the fight even starts. If you control the perception of good and evil, you can commit any sin and be called a saint. The fortress was never built of stone or code, it was built on the stories people tell themselves to sleep at night. The architect's silence. The lights in the office tower have gone dark, but the lesson remains etched in the shadows. Julian Vane didn't just survive, he rewrote the rules of the game while everyone else was busy playing it. In the end, the fortress wasn't a building, it was a psychological cage. And the keys were always in the hands of the person who understood human nature best. Remember, power isn't something you are given, it's something you engineer. The world only sees the hero or the villain, but behind the curtain, there is only the architect. If this story opened your eyes to the hidden games being played around you, hit that like button and subscribe to join the Dark Mind Society. Knowledge is the only defense against manipulation. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were Julian? Thank you for watching. Stay sharp, stay observant, and never forget, if you want to understand power, you must first understand people. See you in the next shadows.